What happens if you stop eating sugar for 30 days? Think about it. You probably already know that sugar is bad for you. Everyone knows that. It's nothing new to anyone. But I want to ask you a different question today. Not, is sugar bad for you? Because you already know the answer to that. The question I want to answer is different. What happens, specifically, inside your body, day by day, when you stop consuming added sugar for 30 days? Because when I researched this thoroughly and spent weeks scouring clinical studies, systematic reviews, and data from the CDC and the American Heart Association, what I found was far more detailed, far more fascinating, and in some ways, far more surprising than I expected. The first week is difficult. The second week starts to change. The third and fourth weeks, that's when things get really interesting. Stay with me until the end, because what science documents about these 30 days will change the way you see this substance that's in almost everything you eat. This channel exists because I believe that understanding what happens inside your own body is one of the most powerful gifts you can give yourself. And today, specifically, you're going to learn the following. What research documents happens in the human body during the first 30 days without added sugar? Broken down by phase, with the biological mechanisms behind each stage, the mistakes that sabotage results, and what to really do to make those 30 days worthwhile. Let's start with the number that left me speechless when I looked it up. According to data from the CDC and the US Department of Agriculture, the average American consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugar per day. That equates to more than 70 grams, or about 270 calories, from added sugar alone every day. Now compare that number with what the American Heart Association recommends: a maximum of 6 teaspoons per day for women and 9 for men. In other words, the average American is consuming almost double or triple the recommended limit every day at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And the fact that impressed me even more. According to research published based on USDA data, more than 70% of packaged foods sold in the United States contain added sugar. It appears under more than 50 different names on labels: high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltose, sucrose, evaporated cane juice. It's as if sugar has 50 false identities to find you without you realizing it. Imagine a 62-year-old woman, let's call her Margaret. She wakes up every day, has a yogurt with granola that looks healthy, eats a cereal bar for a snack, drinks orange juice at lunchtime, and ends the day with a small dessert that doesn't count. She doesn't consider herself someone who eats a lot of sugar. And technically, at no point during the day did she eat any real sweets. But if you added up all the added sugar in those foods, it would easily amount to 20 or 25 teaspoons every day, without her knowing. And that's exactly what science is documenting. Invisible sugar is inside the bodies of millions of Americans, doing things they never authorized. To understand what happens when you stop eating sugar, you first need to understand what excess sugar is doing while you're still consuming it. Think of your liver as an energy processing plant, a refinery. When you eat sugar, especially fructose, which makes up half of regular table sugar, this refinery receives more raw material than it can process at the moment. And what does it do with the excess? It converts it into fat. This process is called de novo lipogenesis, and research published in the American Heart Association's journal Circulation documents that excess fructose from added sugars overloads the liver in a way that, in cases of chronic and high consumption, contributes to the development of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, a condition that, according to the CDC, affects about 25% of American adults. At the same time, the pancreas is being bombarded. Every time you eat sugar, blood glucose levels rise, and the pancreas releases insulin to cope with this increase. Think of the pancreas as a factory with an emergency siren. Every time sugar enters, the siren goes off, and the factory goes into accelerated production mode. When this happens dozens of times a day, every day, for years, the cells that should respond to insulin begin to ignore the signal, like neighbors who stop hearing an alarm that's constantly going off. This is insulin resistance setting in, and it's the documented gateway to type 2 diabetes. A review published in the American Heart Association's journal Circulation analyzed decades of evidence and documented that diets high in added sugar are associated with higher levels of triglycerides in the blood, a fat that circulates in the blood and is a direct marker of cardiovascular risk. And then there's the brain. Neuroscience research documents that sugar activates the brain's reward system, specifically the dopaminergic pathways, the same ones involved in other reward-seeking behaviors. With repeated and high consumption, the brain begins to need more stimulation to produce the same response, a tolerance mechanism that scientific literature continues to investigate and that helps explain why stopping eating sugar isn't just a matter of willpower. So when you stop eating sugar, it's not just a matter of eating fewer calories. You're interrupting a cycle that involves the liver, pancreas, blood, heart, and brain all at once. It's more complex and more powerful than it seems. Now I'm going to show you the 3 most common mistakes people make when trying to stop eating sugar. Mistakes that sabotage results before they even appear. Mistake number 1: confusing sugar-free with no added sugar. This is the most common mistake and perhaps the most frustrating because the person puts in the effort and sees no results, without understanding why. Sugar-free on labels means the product contains no sucrose, common table sugar, but it may contain high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin, dextrose, concentrated fruit juice, and dozens of other caloric sweeteners that the body processes in a very similar way. Imagine a 55-year-old who decides to stop eating sugar and replaces regular yogurt with unsweetened yogurt, swaps juice for zero sugar juice, and eats a protein bar with no added sugar as a snack. For the first 2 weeks, they don't feel any difference. They get frustrated and give up. What happened? He stopped consuming sucrose but continued consuming other added sugars with different names. According to researchers at the Harvard School of Public Health, what matters for metabolism is the total amount of added sugar, regardless of the name that appears on the label. The practical solution is simple. Always look for the added sugars field in the nutrition facts table. This field was introduced by the FDA precisely to make visible what was previously hidden. Mistake number 2: cutting out sugar all at once without proper replacement. The first week without sugar can be difficult, and there's a real biological reason for that. As we've seen, sugar activates the brain's dopaminergic pathways. When you abruptly remove this source of stimulation, the brain enters an adjustment period. Research documents symptoms such as headaches, fatigue, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and intense cravings in the first 3 to 7 days. These symptoms are real, have a documented biological cause, and understanding this in advance is crucial to getting through them without giving up. The problem is that most people interpret these symptoms as a sign that the body needs sugar, and so they give in. But what the body is doing is exactly the opposite. It's recalibrating itself. Research on food preferences shows that after 2 to 3 weeks without added sugar, naturally sweet foods, like fruits, begin to seem much more palatable. The palate recalibrates when it is not constantly being overstimulated. Mistake number 3: not recognizing where the sugar is hidden. This is the most silent mistake, and the most common among people who sincerely believe they are eating sugar-free. The biggest culprits aren't the obvious sweets. They're the foods that nobody associates with sugar: salad dressings, ketchup, sliced bread, granola, fruit yogurt, sports drinks, cereal bars, canned soups, and ready-made seasonings. According to USDA data cited in CDC research, sweetened beverages account for about half of all added sugar consumption in the United States. But the other half comes from those processed foods that seem neutral or even healthy. Imagine someone who has eliminated soda, sweets, and desserts, but keeps barbecue sauce on their meat, granola on their yogurt, and sliced bread at breakfast. They think they're sugar-free, but they may be consuming 8 to 10 teaspoons of added sugar just from those innocent choices. Before I show you what really happens phase by phase inside the body when you do this right, Let me ask you something. If you've made it this far and learned something you didn't know, please like this video. It's a small gesture, but it greatly helps this channel grow and reach more people who can benefit from this information. And if you're not already subscribed, now is a great time. Every week there's a new topic, always based on real research and always without any product to sell. Now let's get to the part I like best. What science says happens, phase by phase, when you do it the right way. I'll organize what the research documents into 4 practical actions and then into a phased roadmap of what to expect. Action number 1. Define what you are eliminating before you begin. The science is clear. The target is added sugars, not natural sugars. Whole fruits, vegetables, milk all contain sugar naturally, but they also contain fiber, protein, and micronutrients that completely modulate how the body processes that sugar. The American Heart Association and the dietary guidelines for Americans are specific. The recommended limit is for added sugar, that which was added to the food during processing or preparation. Whole fruits are not included in the target. The first practical step: over the next 3 days, read the label of everything you eat and add up the grams of added sugars. This number will surprise you and give you a real starting point. Action number 2. Replace. Don't just eliminate. Research on eating behavior is consistent. Simply trying to not eat something without replacing it with something else has a high abandonment rate. The brain needs substitutes for the patterns it previously executed automatically. Swap sweetened drinks for sparkling water and fruit. Swap sugary fruit yogurt for plain yogurt with fresh fruit. Swap cereal bars for nuts and fruit. The sweet taste is still present, but it comes from sources that don't trigger the same glycemic spike or the same insulin response. Action number 3. Get to know the level map, and don't give up on the hardest one. Here's what research suggests happens phase by phase, and that most people don't know in advance. Days 1 to 7, the most difficult phase. The brain is adjusting to the change in dopaminergic pathways. Headaches, fatigue, irritability, and intense cravings are common and have a documented biological cause. Research on the neurobiology of sugar indicates that these symptoms peak between the 2nd and 5th day and tend to decrease by the end of the 1st week. Knowing this in advance is the difference between persisting and giving up. Days 8 to 14, the adjustment begins. Cravings decrease. The pancreas is receiving less constant stimulation, and insulin production begins to regulate. Many people report that sleep improves during this window, which makes biological sense since glucose spikes and drops during the night interfere with sleep phases. Days 15 to 21. The first visible effects. The reduction of bloating, especially abdominal bloating. Excess sugar contributes to sodium and water retention. More stable energy throughout the day, without the peaks and troughs that came after each sugary meal. And your palate begins to change. Naturally, sweet foods start to seem more delicious. Days 22 to 30, where metabolic markers begin to respond. A long-term study published in JAMA Internal Medicine in 2014, conducted by the CDC in conjunction with researchers from the Harvard School of Public Health, followed more than 31,000 Americans and documented that adults who consumed 25% or more of their daily calories from added sugar had almost 3 times the risk of death from cardiovascular disease than those who stayed below 10%. The study also documented that excess sugar is associated with elevated triglyceride levels and blood pressure, and that reducing consumption is linked to improvements in these markers. Important. This is a long-term association study, not a 30-day experiment, but it consistently documents where the needle moves when added sugar is reduced. A review published in the journal Nutrients reinforces this point. Consuming a high-sugar diet for just a few weeks is enough to raise triglycerides and alter cardiovascular markers, and reducing sugar reverses this effect. The exact time frame varies from person to person and depends on the starting point. Action number 4, the most counterintuitive. Don't eliminate all sweetness. Research on eating behavior suggests that trying to eliminate all sensations of sweetness from the diet increases the risk of abandonment and subsequent binge eating. Whole fruits, naturally sweet vegetables like sweet potatoes and carrots, all these foods satisfy the craving for sweetness without the metabolic impact of added sugar. The strategy is not to eliminate pleasure, it's to redirect where it comes from. Even with all this, there are 4 saboteurs that can silently cancel out all the benefits. Saboteur number 1, substitutes that seem healthy but aren't. Honey, coconut sugar, agave syrup, brown sugar. Marketing positions them as healthier alternatives to white sugar. But for metabolism, for the liver and pancreas, the difference is minimal. They are added sugars with different names and a similar metabolic impact. Saboteur number 2, unmanaged stress. When cortisol is chronically elevated due to stress, the body raises blood glucose on its own and increases sugar cravings in response to discomfort. Without stress management strategies, the temptation to return to sugar increases significantly in the 2nd and 3rd weeks. Saboteur number 3, or insufficient sound research published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, shows that sleep deprivation increases levels of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and reduces leptin, the satiety hormone. This directly increases cravings for sweet and high-calorie foods. Poor sleep actively sabotages attempts to cut back on sugar. Saboteur number 4, the all-or-nothing mentality. One of the most consistent findings in behavioral diet research is that the "I messed up once, so I'll eat everything now" mentality is responsible for the majority of slip-ups. A one-off slip-up doesn't erase 20 days of metabolic progress. What erases it is complete abandonment after the slip-up. So what happens if you stop eating sugar for 30 days? The first week is biologically difficult, and now you know why. The second week, the body begins to reorganize itself. The third week, the first effects appear in how you feel. And the fourth week is where the markers that matter begin to respond, and the direction of this change, when added sugar consumption falls within recommended limits, is consistent with what science documents. But perhaps the most important thing I want you to take away from this video isn't a number or a symptom. It's this idea: sugar is not poison. Your body knows exactly what to do with it. The problem was never the sugar you consciously chose to eat. It was the sugar that entered your body without you knowing it was there. Information changes everything, and now you have more of it. Before we wrap up, everything I've shared here is based on published research, but every body is unique. If you have diabetes, prediabetes, are taking medication, or have any other health condition, talk to your doctor before making significant dietary changes. This channel exists to help you understand the science, not to replace individualized medical care. Until then, in the next video.